Hello, this is Sweetie Seeker here. I wanted to do a video today because yesterday on Facebook I saw this story about how this man saved his daughter's life because he had a gun against two thugs. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to show you the story. Okay, now I'm going to stop and I'm going to show you a video clip of more stories of how guns have saved people's lives.
I'm Kendall Montgomery, and this is Ultimate Concealed Carry News. Each week we assemble the top stories from network news, online news outlets, and videos relevant to you, bringing you your weekly gun news all in one place. On this week's show, we're following multiple accounts that took place last week in which responsible gun owners were able to defend themselves in acts of heroism. From the deadly new trend called the knockout game hitting many major cities around the country, to an elderly cancer patient in a rural community defending himself against intruders, our focus on this episode, guns save lives. This week we learned a horrifying and deadly new trend called the knockout game is sweeping the country. The players, who are usually teens, target a stranger on the street and try to knock the person out with one punch. So far, at least 7 deaths have been linked to the game. Major news networks all across the country have been running the story to warn people to keep a sharp eye out when walking alone on city streets. In Lansing, Michigan, a teen attempted to attack an unsuspecting man waiting to pick up his daughter at a school bus stop, but he had no idea that his intended victim was legally carrying a handgun for self-defense.
I hadn't had any enemies or any reason to believe that they would be looking or doing anything to me.
We're not revealing the victim's identity for his protection. He was attacked, but not by a punch, by a faulty taser, and was able to protect himself with his own legal concealed carry .40 caliber pistol.
He shoved something into my side. Wasn't sure what it was. It had some force to it. I wasn't sure if it was a knife, if it was a gun.
17-year-old Marvell Weaver was shot twice. He's been sentenced to a year in jail for the attack, but he admits he's getting off easy.
It was just a lesson learned.
The knockout game is a cruel and cowardly way to attack innocent people. But gamers, be warned. People are not just fighting back, they're shooting back as well. An intruder in Milwaukee, Oregon tried to break into a woman's home after he had already walked into 2 other apartments. The intruder followed Crystal McKinney upstairs and inside, but was not prepared for her to be armed herself.
I said, "What are you doing?" He says, are you ready to meet God?" I immediately ran to the bedroom to get my firearm where I drew it here. I pointed it at him and said, "Get out of my house or I will shoot you."
McKinney said he turned to leave. She followed him, shut the door, and called 911.
He had no reaction. He was straight-faced. It seemed like he didn't know what was going on or why I had a gun. If it's my life or somebody else, I am not afraid to hurt the person that's trying to hurt me. It's life or death.
Neighbors eventually caught the man and held him until police arrived. Police said they were familiar with the man and held him for a mental evaluation. The district attorney will decide if the man will face charges. Thankfully, this is another example of a defensive gun use in which no shots were fired, no one was hurt, and the bad guy ended up behind bars. Home invasions happen everywhere. Even in very rural areas like Pine County, a farm community located 90 miles north of Minneapolis, where intruders last week broke into 75-year-old Charles Carlson's home with the intent to steal the painkillers that he takes to deal with the pain associated with his terminal cancer. Carlson was startled awake and struggled with the intruder and managed to grab his own gun, at which point he fired one shot, hitting and killing one of the suspects.
A 23-year-old Gypsy Watts was at the wrong end of Charlie Carlson's gun. Authorities say Watts and another man had a gun, broke into Carlson's home, threatened him, and that's when Charlie grabbed his own gun and shot Watts. The other guys took off.
It's a terrible thing to have to do this, and he just feels terrible, but you know, he kind of said he wasn't going to be killed.
Carlson told me what a crazy guy to come into this house because everybody in Sandstone knows he's a gun enthusiast. Carlson says he's sorry the young man lost his life, but he had no choice. There's nothing like looking down the barrel of someone else's gun.
It was either you know, him or him. So if it's going to be me or you, it's going to be you. I would do the same thing. Somebody was trying to rob my house and break in my house. Yeah, we use guns up here.
Based on all accounts, Carlson should not face any charges in the incident. Minnesota does have a castle doctrine law on the books. In last week's news, we featured 2 Gonzaga college students who fended off an intruder into their campus apartment with a gun and were put on probation for violating the school's policy. This week, a Circle K store manager is facing a similar situation. Johnny Gerald of Douglasville, Georgia, in an act of self-defense, shot at an armed robber who put a gun to his head while he was working at the convenience store, but was then fired from Circle K for violating the company's no guns policy.
These security photos provided by the Sheriff's Department show him working in a back office when a robber suddenly pepper sprays him, pulls out a pistol, slams him to the floor, and puts a gun to his head.
I can't really describe all the expletive words he used, but basically give me the money or he was going to kill me, and he was very specific about, you know, what he was going to do to me.
Gerald replied the safe was out front, and when the robber turned his back on him, Gerald pulled his own pistol from his pants and began firing. The apparently uninjured robber took off like a scared rabbit and is still on the loose. Gerald says Circle K suspended him right after the Saturday robbery and gave him this firing notice Thursday for violating its company policy against guns. He admits he was aware of the policy, but claims his manager had looked the other way after another clerk was murdered at the store a few years ago. Gerald has a firearms license for his pistol, and the Sheriff's Department says he did nothing wrong legally. But under Georgia law, his employer has the right to fire him.
I think the firing was unjustified. I believe it was unjustified.
Like many others who find themselves in a similar situation, Gerald says he wouldn't have changed anything about his actions that day. So even though he did violate the company's policy, should he be fired for defending himself? And should policies such as this one and the one the students at Gonzaga University violated even exist? Be a part of the debate. Post your thoughts on the matter or click here. I'm Kendall Montgomery. Thank you for watching and see you next week.
Stay connected. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter.
Okay, now I'm going to post a link down below of even more stories of people who have saved their lives by having a gun. And I guess the bigger question that I want people that are like anti-gun and think that, you know, removing guns from society is going to help like solve all this gun violence that's happening. How come you never hear like stories about people who have actually saved their own lives and the lives of others by having a gun and using this gun? Why did you never hear them? You only hear of stories of like Elliot Rogers and any other weirdo that goes to shoot up a bunch of people. So just think about that.